The signal from the void. The signal had been transmitting for 73 cycles, a desperate plea that spiraled through the cold emptiness of space, carrying with it the final hopes of a dying civilization. Please, anyone. Our world is dying. The skies burn. The ground trembles. We have little time left. If anyone can hear us, please help. The message reached the outer sensors of the Galactic Consortium first. Their vast network of quantum receivers detected the primitive radio waves, analyzed the simple binary patterns, and forwarded the decoded transmission to the Grand Council. The signal originated from a small, unremarkable blue-green planet orbiting a standard yellow star in the less developed eastern sector of the galaxy. Vaultek, the presiding voice of the Council, reviewed the data with cold efficiency. His species, the Arcanites, had evolved beyond physical form millennia ago, existing now as energy patterns housed in crystalline matrices. The emotional content of the transmission meant nothing to him. Species designation: Nylori. Technology level: Pre-stellar. Threat assessment: none. Value assessment: minimal. Vaultek announced to the assembled council representatives. The signal indicates their planet faces imminent destruction from multiple asteroid impacts. Intervention would require significant resources. The representatives of 17 advanced civilizations debated briefly. The consortium's non-interference policy regarding pre-stellar species was clear. Resources were finite, even for them. The mathematics were simple. The Nylori had not yet proven their worth to the greater galactic community. The motion to render aid is denied, Vaultek declared. The natural course will be allowed to proceed. But someone else was listening. Captain Alina Reyes stood before the holographic projection in the command center of the UES Pathfinder, Earth's most advanced exploration vessel. Her dark eyes reflected the blue light of the alien text that the ship's AI had translated. 26 Earth years had passed since humanity had ventured beyond their solar system, establishing fragile colonies on distant worlds and encountering a universe far more densely populated than they had imagined. Most species they encountered regarded humans with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Humans were unpredictable, emotional, dangerous. "Play it again," she ordered. The alien message filled the command center. Strange musical tones now converted to a voice that conveyed unmistakable fear and desperation, even through the translation matrix. "Our astronomers have confirmed it. A cluster of asteroids will strike our world within one orbital cycle. Our technology cannot prevent it. Billions will die. Please, if anyone hears this, we have children." Commander Jackson Chen, Reyes' second in command, checked his instruments. Signal originated from the Cygnus arm. Captain. Planet designation HD 7729 C, approximately 83 light-years from Earth. Atmosphere nitrogen-oxygen mix, habitable for humans with minimal filtration. Their biochemistry appears carbon-based, similar to ours. How many other species have responded? Reyes asked, though she already suspected the answer. "None, Captain," Chen replied. "According to intercepted consortium communications, the situation has been classified non-priority. Evacuation would require resources they deem excessive for a pre-stellar civilization." Reyes' jaw tightened. She thought of Earth's history, of civilizations that had collapsed while others watched from afar, of genocides witnessed but not prevented. She remembered the stories her grandmother had told her of their ancestors' pleas for help that were met with nothing but silence. "Plot a course, maximum FTL. Notify the UES Mercy and UES Defender to prepare for planetary defense and evacuation protocols." Her voice was steel. "Contact Earth Command. Tell them we're invoking the Frontier Directive." The bridge fell silent. The Frontier Directive was humanity's answer to the cold calculus of the consortium. Direct intervention to prevent extinction events, regardless of technological development or political considerations. "Captain," Chen said quietly, "the consortium has explicitly forbidden." "I know what they've forbidden," Reyes interrupted, "and I know what I can live with. Make the call. As the Pathfinder's engines powered up, Reyes studied the sensor data. The Nylori's planet faced complete devastation. A rogue asteroid cluster, dislodged from its orbit in the system's outer belt, would strike their world in less than 40 Earth days. The Nylori possessed spaceflight capabilities, but had barely reached their own moon. Their weapons were primitive, their defenses non-existent against this level of threat. "If I may, Captain," the ship's eye interjected, "I've analyzed their communications infrastructure. The Nylori have achieved global unity relatively early in their development. Their art, music, and philosophical systems show remarkable sophistication despite their technological limitations. Initial language analysis suggests they have no concept of war as we understand it." Reyes nodded. "A species worth saving. The consortium might disagree," Chen noted. "Then it's fortunate they don't command this ship," Reyes replied. "How long until we reach them?" "At maximum FTL, 14 days. The Mercy and Defender are responding. They'll be 2 days behind us." Reyes studied the holographic image of the Nylori world, a vibrant blue-green sphere that reminded her painfully of Earth. "Then we better hurry." 3 days into their journey, the expected transmission arrived from the consortium. The holographic form of Ambassador Klevak, a mantis-like Zithori, appeared on the bridge. "Captain Reyes," the alien's voice was precisely modulated. "The consortium has been made aware of your trajectory and apparent intentions regarding the Nylori situation. I must remind you that interference with pre-stellar civilizations violates Section 12 of the Acquiescence Treaty that Earth signed upon joining the Galactic community." Reyes met the alien's compound eyes without flinching. "Ambassador, I'm familiar with the treaty. I'm also familiar with the universal rights doctrine that your own species championed 3 centuries ago, which established the right of all sentient beings to survive existential threats. The doctrine was never intended to apply to species that have not achieved certain technological benchmarks," the ambassador countered smoothly. "The resources required will be provided by Earth," Reyes interrupted. "We're not asking for consortium assistance. Captain, the matter is not simply about resources. The natural development off. There won't be any development if they're extinct, Ambassador." Reyes stood, her patience wearing thin. "We've made our decision. Pathfinder out." The hologram dissipated, leaving the bridge in momentary silence. "They'll try to stop us," Chen said. "They can try," Reyes replied. "But we'll reach the Nylori first." For the next 11 days, the 3 human ships crossed the void at maximum speed. Engineers worked around the clock preparing equipment that might redirect or destroy the incoming asteroids. Scientists studied every scrap of data they could gather about the Nylori, their planet, and the approaching threat. On the 14th day, the Pathfinder dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Nylori system. The planet hung in space before them, beautiful and fragile, its inhabitants unaware that their desperate call had been answered. "We're being scanned," the tactical officer reported. "Primitive technology, just basic electromagnetic sweeps." "They've detected us," Reyes said. "Open a channel using their communication protocols. Let's introduce ourselves." As the communications officer prepared the transmission, the sensor array lit up with new contacts. "Captain," Chen's voice was tight. "We're not alone. 3 consortium vessels have just arrived in system. They're positioning themselves between us and the planet." Reyes watched as the sleek, silver ships of the consortium moved into blocking formation. Their technology was centuries beyond Earth's. In a direct confrontation, the human vessels wouldn't stand a chance. "They're hailing us," the communications officer reported. Reyes squared her shoulders. On screen, the image of Vaultek appeared, his crystalline form pulsing with cool blue light. "Captain Reyes, this is your final warning. The consortium has determined that the fate of the Nylori will proceed according to natural law. Your ships will withdraw immediately." Reyes felt the weight of billions of lives on her shoulders as she formulated her response. Behind Vaultek, she could see other consortium representatives watching. some with curiosity, others with disdain. Presiding voice, she began formally. Humanity respectfully declines to abandon a sentient species to extinction when we have the means to help. We were once like them, vulnerable, alone, calling into the darkness. If the positions were reversed, we would hope someone would answer our call. Your emotional reasoning is precisely why pre-stellar intervention is forbidden, Vaultec replied. The cosmic order. A new signal interrupted the transmission, broadcasting on all frequencies. The musical tones of the Nylori language filled the command center, but this time, the translation came through clearly. Unknown vessels, we see you. Are you here to help us? Please, our world is dying. In that moment, Reyes made the decision that would forever change humanity's place in the galaxy. She opened a direct channel to the Nylori, bypassing the consortium entirely. People of HD 7729C, she said, knowing her words would mark a turning point in history. We are humans from the planet Earth. We received your message, and yes, we've come to help. Against all odds. The skies of Nyloria split open as the UES Pathfinder descended through wispy lavender clouds. On the surface, vast crowds gathered, tall, willowy beings with luminescent skin in shades of blue and green and eyes that reflected light like polished opals. They watched with a mixture of fear and hope as the human vessel, enormous by their standards, settled onto the central plaza of their capital city. Captain Rice stood at the airlock, preparing for first contact. The ship's sensors indicated the atmosphere was breathable with only minimal filtration. She adjusted her personal shield, standard protocol for unknown biohazards, and took a deep breath. Consortium vessels are maintaining orbit, Commander Chen reported. They're not interfering. Yet. They're watching, Rice replied. They want to see what we do. The external cameras showed thousands of Nylori gathered beyond the landing zone, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in what the AI suggested was a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Their society had achieved global unity centuries earlier than humanity had, developing the civilization based on cooperation rather than competition. They had no concept of warfare, which had accelerated their artistic and philosophical development, but left them vulnerable to external threats. Let's not keep them waiting, Rice said. Open the doors. The airlock cycled, and Rice stepped onto the soil of an alien world, the first human to make contact with the Nylori. Behind her, a team of scientists, engineers, and diplomats followed, Earth's best and brightest, assembled for this mission of mercy. A delegation of Nylori approached, led by a tall figure whose skin shimmered with intricate patterns of light. The translation matrix in Raya's ear converted their musical language in real time. I am Ilara, speaker for the Nylori consensus. The alien said, You have come from beyond the stars to answer our call. Reyes nodded. I am Captain Elena Reyes of Earth. We received your message and came as quickly as we could. The Great Council told us no one would come. Ilara's inner light dimmed slightly. That we were too distant to. Insignificant. That's not how we see things, Reyes replied. We were once like you, alone, vulnerable, facing threats we couldn't overcome without help. Why would you travel so far for strangers? Another Nylori asked, their patterns showing what the AI identified as confusion. Reyes looked toward the horizon where her crew was already unloading equipment, because that's what humans do. When someone needs help, we come. It's how we survived our own darkest times. Within hours, human scientists were working alongside Nylori astronomers, combining Earth's advanced sensor technology with the Nylori's intimate knowledge of their solar system. The news was grim. The asteroid cluster, remnants of a shattered moon from the outer system, contained 7 major bodies, each capable of causing extinction-level damage. The largest was nearly 15 kilometers in diameter. Even with the Defender and Mercy, we don't have enough firepower to destroy them all, Chen said during the emergency meeting in the Pathfinder's conference room. What about deflection? Dr. Samira Kazimi, the mission's lead physicist, pulled up holographic projections. If we position mass drivers at these coordinates, we might alter their trajectory enough to miss the planet. We'd need at least 12 mass drivers, Engineer Taylor responded. We only have 4 on the 3 ships combined. Ray studied the projections. What about the Nylori? They must have mining equipment, industrial machinery we could repurpose. Their technology is primitive by our standards. Taylor shook his head. They've barely achieved spaceflight. Their most advanced ships can barely reach their moon. But they've survived on this planet for over 50,000 years, Rice countered. They understand their environment better than we ever could. There must be something. The conference room doors slid open, and a junior officer entered. Captain, we're detecting multiple ships entering the system. Consortium vessels, but different configurations than before. The main screen activated, showing a fleet of sleek, predatory-looking ships emerging from FTL. Their design was distinctly different from the Consortium's diplomatic vessels. Those are Vexari warships, Chen said, his voice tight. The Consortium's enforcers. Ray's blood ran cold. The Vexari were known throughout the galaxy as the military arm of the Consortium, ruthlessly efficient and utterly dedicated to maintaining the established order. They're hailing us, the communications officer reported. The holographic form of a Vexari commander appeared, tall, reptilian, with scales that shifted color like oil on water. This is Commander Cyrex of the Consortium Enforcement Division. Human vessels, you are in violation of Directive 5591. You will cease all planetside operations and withdraw from this system immediately. Ray stepped forward. Commander, we're conducting a humanitarian mission to save billions of lives. Surely the Consortium doesn't intend to prevent that. The natural order will proceed, Cyrex replied coldly. The Nylori have not earned the right to survive this evolutionary challenge. You have 6 hours to evacuate your personnel and depart. After that, we will remove you by force. The hologram vanished before Reyes could respond. They can't be serious, Dr. Kazemi whispered. They'd let an entire civilization die when we could save them. The Consortium views species like commodities, Chen explained bitterly. If the investment outweighs the return, they don't act. Pre-stellar civilizations rarely make the cut. Reyes paced the conference room, mind racing. The Vexari outgun us 10-1. We can't fight them directly. So we surrender? Taylor asked, incredulous. No. Raya's eyes hardened. We work faster. Contact the Nylori Council. I need to speak with their scientists, engineers, anyone who knows this solar system inside and out. The answer is here somewhere. We just haven't found it yet. Within the hour, the Pathfinder's conference room was filled with the brightest minds of both species. Holograms displayed the approaching asteroid cluster from every angle, calculations running continuously as they sought a solution. What about your crystal fields? Dr. Kazeni asked, pointing to geological surveys of Nyloria. These formations are unlike anything I've seen before. Ilara's skin pulsed with light patterns. The singing crystals. They're sacred to us. They amplify and redirect energy through the planetary crust. A spark of inspiration lit in Raya's eyes. Could they amplify our deflector beams? If we positioned our ships at key points and channeled the energy through your crystal network? It's never been attempted, Ilara said hesitantly. The crystals respond to specific frequencies. They would need to be attuned, which would require precise calculations and adjustments that would take weeks to. Engineer Taylor began, but was interrupted by a soft chime from his tablet. He stared at the incoming data, eyes widening. Captain, the Mercy and Defender have just dropped out of FTL at the system edge. They're reporting Vexari pursuit vessels on their tail. Time until asteroid impact. Reyes demanded. 38 hours, Dr. Kazeni answered grimly. And the Vexari ultimatum expires in 5, Chen added. Reyes looked around the room at the faces of 2 species united by a common threat. Then we have 5 hours to develop a plan that's never been attempted before. using technology from two different worlds, while outmaneuvering the most powerful military force in the galaxy. A smile slowly spread across her face. Sounds like a typical day for humanity. For the next 4 hours, humans and Nylori worked feverishly together. The crystal network that spanned the planet had originally evolved as a natural defense mechanism against solar radiation, but the Nylori had learned to harness it for communication and energy distribution. If properly synchronized, the crystals could theoretically amplify the deflector beams from the human ships by a factor of 100. As the deadline approached, Reyes gathered her officers on the bridge. The Vexeri will be expecting us to either fight or flee. They won't expect us to disappear. She pointed to a geological map of the planet. These crystal caverns extend for hundreds of kilometers beneath the surface. They'll shield our ships from detection if we can get them inside. You want to land all 3 ships? Chen asked incredulously. The Defender is a battle cruiser. It's not designed for planetary landing. No choice, Reyes replied. Once the crystal network is activated, we'll need all 3 ships positioned at equidistant points to create a stable energy triangle. The tactical officer spoke up. Captain, the Vexeri are launching fighters. They're beginning their approach. Reyes straightened her uniform. Send the order to the Mercy and Defender. We go to ground now. And pray this works. As the human ships descended toward the surface, the Vexeri fighters screamed into the atmosphere in pursuit. What followed was a desperate race against both time and a superior enemy. The UES Defender, never meant for atmospheric flight, groaned and shuddered as Commander Adams pushed it to its structural limits, diving into a massive crystal cavern moments before Vexeri energy weapons scorched the air where it had been. The UES Mercy, a medical vessel with minimal defensive capabilities, sustained damage to its port stabilizers, but managed to reach its designated position beneath the northern ice cap, the crystal formations there glowing with increased intensity as the ship's systems interfaced with them. On the Pathfinder, Reyes felt the ship shudder as they pushed deeper into the planetary crust, guided by Nylori navigators who knew every contour of their world's hidden crystal veins. Behind them, Vexeri fighters pulled up, unwilling to risk the narrow confines of the crystal tunnels. All ships in position, Chen reported. Crystal network is responding to our energy signatures. The Vexeri are establishing orbit, the tactical officer added. They're powering up their main weapons. Reyes opened a channel to all 3 human ships and the Nylori leadership. This is Captain Reyes. In 24 hours, those asteroids will hit this planet unless we stop them. The Vexeri believe we've failed. Let's prove them wrong. Commence crystal synchronization. Across Nyloria, the ancient crystal network began to glow, pulsing with energy as human technology interfaced with it for the first time. Beneath the surface, engineers from both species worked frantically to align frequencies and stabilize power flows. On the surface, Vexeri ground forces began landing, searching for the hidden human ships. As the countdown to impact passed the 20-hour mark, Ilara approached Reyes in the Pathfinder's engineering section. Your people work with such intensity, she observed, watching as humans rushed from station to station, making adjustments, solving problems, refusing to accept failure as an option. It's who we are, Reyes replied simply. When faced with impossible odds, humans don't give up. We get creative. The consortium told us you were dangerous. Ilara's skin pulsed with a pattern that the translation matrix identified as wry amusement. Now I understand why. Reyes smiled grimly. They haven't seen anything yet. The most dangerous beings. The final countdown to asteroid impact had begun. 18 hours remained before the first of the massive space rocks would strike Nyloria, triggering a cascade of impacts that would render the planet uninhabitable. Deep beneath the surface, 3 human ships lay connected to an ancient crystal network, preparing for one desperate attempt to save an alien civilization. In the command center established within the largest crystal cavern, Captain Reyes studied the holographic projection, showing both the approaching asteroids and the Vexari blockade in orbit above. Crystal synchronization at 87%, reported Dr. Kazemi. We're making progress, but the network was never designed for this level of power. There are instabilities in the northern quadrant. Commander Chen pointed to a cluster of red indicators on the display. Vexari ground forces are getting closer to the Mercy's position. If they disrupt that node, the entire network will collapse. Reyes rubbed her temples, fighting exhaustion. None of her crew had slept in over 30 hours. We need a distraction, something to draw their attention away from our ships. Ilara, who had barely left Reyes' side since the operation began, suddenly pulsed with excitement. The harmonic ceremony. It's a traditional celebration where we activate the crystal network to create light displays in the sky. If we initiated it now, you could mask our energy signatures. Reyes finished, hope kindling in her eyes. How quickly can you organize it? Within the hour, the people would welcome it, a final celebration if we are to die. We're not dying today, Reyes said firmly. Get it started. As Nylori throughout the planet began the ritual activations of crystal nodes in cities, villages, and sacred sites, the Vexari sensors were suddenly overwhelmed by thousands of energy signatures. On the surface, spectacular light displays filled the sky, masking the true purpose of the crystal activation. The Vexari ground forces, confused by the sudden planetary activity, pulled back to regroup. It's working, Chen exclaimed. They're withdrawing from the critical nodes. Reyes turned to the engineering team. This is our window. Push the synchronization to maximum. We won't get another chance. For the next 6 hours, humans and Nylori worked in perfect coordination. The crystal network reached 95% synchronization, creating a planetary-scale energy web that could, theoretically, amplify the deflector beams from the 3 human ships by a factor of 120. But theory and practice rarely aligned perfectly. We'd have a problem, Engineer Taylor announced grimly. The power requirements for sustaining the deflector beam through the crystal network exceed our ship's reactor capabilities. We can generate enough power for maybe 2 minutes at full strength. After that, our cores will reach critical levels. 2 minutes won't be enough to deflect all 7 asteroids, Dr. Kazemi said, running simulations. We need at least 8 minutes of sustained power. Silence fell over the command center as the implications sank in. Even with all their ingenuity and cooperation, they had fallen short. What if we overloaded the reactors? Reyes asked quietly. Chen stared at her. That would destroy the ships. But would it work? Reyes pressed, looking at Taylor. The engineer hesitated. Theoretically, yes. A controlled reactor overload would generate enough power for the full 8 minutes, but coolant systems would fail after 2 minutes. There would be no way to prevent a cascade failure afterward. How long would the crews have to evacuate after initiating the overload? Taylor's face paled as he understood what the captain was suggesting. Maybe 5 minutes, not enough time to get everyone out. Reyes nodded slowly, decision already made. Open a channel to the Defender and Mercy. Elena, Chen said softly, using her first name for perhaps the first time in their years of service together. There has to be another way. I'm open to suggestions, Jackson, she replied. But we have 12 hours until impact and billions of lives hanging in the balance. When no alternative came forward, Reyes addressed the commanders of the other 2 ships. This is Captain Reyes. We've run the numbers. To generate enough power for a successful deflection, we'll need to initiate a controlled reactor overload on all 3 ships. There was a moment of stunned silence before Commander Adams of the Defender responded. Understood, Captain. What are the evacuation parameters? Minimal skeleton crew remains on each ship to manage the final sequences. Everyone else evacuates to the surface before we initiate. Raya's voice was steady despite the weight of what she was asking. This is strictly volunteer only. There was no hesitation from either commander. Both the Defender and Mercy acknowledged the order and began preparations. Throughout the crystal caverns, Humans rushed to secure vital equipment and prepare for evacuation. The Nylori, understanding what was happening, opened their homes and communities to the human crews who would soon be stranded on their world. Ilara approached Reyes as she prepared her own evacuation orders. Your people will sacrifice their ships, their way home, to save us. The ships, yes, Reyes nodded. As for getting home, we'll figure that out later, one crisis at a time. The Nylori skin pulsed with complex patterns of light. The consortium was right to fear you, not because you are violent, but because you are unstoppable. 10 hours before impact, the evacuations were complete. On each ship, a skeleton crew of volunteers remained, engineers to manage the reactor overload, pilots to maintain position, and a commanding officer to coordinate it all. On the Pathfinder, Reyes had ordered Chen to leave the evacuated crew, overriding his protests. Someone needs to represent Earth to the Nylori, she told him firmly, and to the consortium when they realize what we've done. As the final hours ticked down, the Vexari finally understood what was happening. Their commander, Cyrex, opened a direct channel to Reyes. Captain, our sensors detect unusual power buildups in your ship's reactors, the reptilian alien said, mandibles clicking with agitation. This level of interference with natural selection is forbidden. The consortium will view this as an act of war. Reyes met the alien's gaze steadily. Commander, what you call natural selection, we call preventable tragedy. If saving billions of innocent lives means war with the consortium, then so be it. You would risk your entire species for these primitives. Cyrex seemed genuinely bewildered. That's what makes us human, Reyes replied simply. End transmission. With 3 hours remaining until impact, final preparations were complete. The crystal network pulsed with energy, synchronized to the millisecond across the entire planet. The 3 human ships, positioned at equidistant points beneath the surface, powered up their deflector arrays to maximum. All systems ready, reported Lieutenant Rodriguez, one of the volunteers who had remained aboard the Pathfinder. Reactor overload sequence programmed and standing by. Reyes opened a channel to her counterparts on the other ships. Defender, Mercy, final status. Defender ready, Captain, Commander Adams responded. It's been an honor. Mercy standing by, came the steady voice of Commander Katri. For Earth and Nyloria. Reyes took a deep breath, feeling the weight of history upon her. Initiate reactor overload on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Deep beneath the surface of Nyloria, 3 human reactor cores began their controlled descent into overload. Power surged through the ship's systems and into the ancient crystal network. The entire planet seemed to hum with energy as the networked crystals amplified the deflector beams, projecting them skyward with unprecedented force. In orbit, the Vexari watched in astonishment as 3 massive energy beams erupted from the planet's surface, combining into a single coherent force that struck the approaching asteroid cluster. The smallest asteroids vaporized instantly. The larger ones began to shift trajectory, slowly at first, then with increasing speed as the combined force pushed against their massive inertia. It's working, Rodriguez exclaimed, watching the telemetry. Trajectory is changing on all 7 bodies. On the surface, evacuated humans and Nylori alike watched the sky where a brilliant light show played out, the visible manifestation of the energy beams pushing against the approaching doom. Chen stood among them, his eyes fixed on the monitors showing the status of the 3 ships. The reactor temperature indicators were climbing rapidly toward the red. 2 minutes, he murmured. Coolant systems failing. Inside the Pathfinder, warning alarms blared as the ship's systems began to fail under the strain of the overload. Emergency lighting cast a red glow over the bridge as Reyes and her skeleton crew worked to maintain the deflector beam's focus. Reactor temperature critical, Rodriguez reported, sweat streaming down his face from the increasing heat. 3 minutes until catastrophic failure. Asteroid deflection at 60%. Another officer called out. We need at least 2 more minutes at full power. Rise watched the monitors, calculating. Redirect auxiliary power from life support to coolant systems. Buy us another minute. Captain, that will. I know what it means. Rise cut him off. Do it. As life support systems shut down across the Pathfinder, the temperature on the bridge began to rise dramatically. Oxygen levels dropped as the remaining power was channeled to keep the reactor from exploding prematurely. The same scenario played out on the Defender and Mercy. With life support failing, the volunteer crews struggled to maintain consciousness long enough to complete their mission. On the Defender, Commander Adams slumped over his console but managed to lock in the final calculations before darkness took him. On the Mercy, Commander Kekri's last act was to boost power to the deflector array by another 3%, pushing the system beyond all safety parameters. 5 minutes into the operation, Shen watched in horror as the life sign indicators from the Defender and Mercy went dark, one by one. Only the Pathfinder still showed active life signs, though they were fading rapidly. "Elena," he whispered, knowing she couldn't hear him. On the Pathfinder's bridge, Rise was the last one conscious, her vision narrowing as oxygen deprivation set in. The ship's AI provided a final status report. Asteroid deflection at 98%. Projected miss distance, 12,000 kilometers. Reactor overload in 30 seconds. Rise smiled weakly. "Enough to save them," she murmured. With her last strength, she opened a channel to the surface. "Chen, tell Earth, it was worth it." The transmission cut off as the Pathfinder's communication systems failed. 20 seconds later, deep beneath the surface of Nyloria, 3 human ships succumbed to their overloaded reactors. The explosions were contained by the crystal caverns, which absorbed and redistributed the energy through the planetary network in a final spectacular display that lit up the sky across the entire world. In orbit, the Vexari watched in stunned silence as the last of the asteroids slipped past Nyloria, missing the planet by a comfortable margin. The impossible had been accomplished. A pre-stellar civilization had been saved from extinction by a species that, by consortium standards, was barely more advanced than those they had saved. 1 month later, a consortium diplomatic vessel entered Nyloria's orbit. This time, it was not Vaultec, but the Supreme Arbiter herself who materialized before the gathered representatives of both Nylori and the surviving humans.